Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. There's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the U.S. industry, identify top U.S. MSOs that you keep seeing popping up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now market cap-wise, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, of course, pending any incremental legislation that we end up getting if Congress does their job. But with that, we're going to start with the Illinois adult use cannabis monthly sales figures updated as of June 2nd for the month of May. And to go across the board, number of items sold, 3,372,878, which is actually the most out of any month in 2023 so far, which is worth noting, a little bit up from April. For in-state resident sales of 100 million, out-of-state resident sales of 32.7 million, for total sales in May of 132.7, which is actually more than April. Surprising, because we would consider May and June to be a bit of a lull before the next big month, which is typically July, when we typically see the summertime sales spike. And I think it's worth comparing last year versus this year. May, they sold roughly 270,000 more items for just about 3 million more in sales, but nonetheless highlighting that people do want to vote for legal cannabis with their dollars in Illinois given the chance. And considering Missouri is a very hot market right now, good to see steady sales in Illinois. Plus, the extra 185 social equity licensed dispensaries are supposed to be coming online, hopefully by June or July. Killer Chip let us know that as an Illinois resident. And so while that's taken a long time, these numbers are with, from what I understand, the same number of dispensaries as last year. And so link in the description, of course. But with that, New Cannabis Ventures provides a cannabis sales slip for June, or for May, actually. This is out June 6th, though, so fairly new. And unfortunately, we don't get the nice charts that we typically get from Alan. So just going to invite you to pause to read. But sales decreased 2.5% sequentially in April after increasing 11.7% in March from the short February, according to cannabis data analytics firm BDSA. And so, of course, limited to the markets, not all markets are in here, especially not Missouri, one of the new hot ones, but Eastern markets, you can pause to read sequential growth month over month versus annual growth year over year, and the number of millions in sales. But worth noting, Florida and Maryland are still medical only markets, as is Pennsylvania. The rest are also for adult use and medical, while Western markets, all of these are medical and adult use. Obviously, more mature Western markets have a lot more black market cannabis to deal with. So despite no help from Congress still, and having to operate with both hands tied behind their backs, fortunately, these markets continue to chug along, with varying results, of course. But that is the beauty of having 50 different states reforming their laws at different times, with the idea being that some states programs are going to be a lot more successful than others, which will help compensate for the lesser successful ones, and then states that reform their laws later will just adopt the best programs and take the best parts of it. And so while that is the case, it really depends, as we've seen from New York and New Jersey, how the policy is written and implemented. And it shows us that a lot of states focusing on social equity are a little bit more socialist than we'd like them to be here in the Western world. And sadly, they're using the cannabis industry as an experiment to bottleneck the industry and write policy that very much favors regulators and the state government and federal government as opposed to the industry. And so while that's very unfortunate, and we've seen the worst in New York, let's just hope Maryland doesn't go as badly down that path. But as MJ Biz Daily reports, Maryland offers funds to help medical cannabis operators move into adult use. And so while we're used to subsidies as they're handed out in pretty much every industry, we are seeing more and more just state and corporate partnership, which is not ideal. But I imagine this is going to help multi-state operators and single state operators as well. So not just MSOs, but probably mom and pop shop operators in the state. Grants and loans to help existing medical cannabis companies move into the state's impending adult use cannabis market for July 1st, when medical will be able to start selling adult use in the state. And so, of course, you can pause to read what the grants will do: help the cost of license conversion from medical to rec, and grants or loans or startup capital and operating expenses to help social equity licensees become operational. And so, fortunately, they're smaller loans, $25,000 to $50,000. And so seems a lot more controlled than spending an excess of money and hoping it's just going to work. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read, but grant applications are being accepted through June 30th. And so, again, let's just hope Maryland doesn't butcher their rollout as badly as New Jersey, or, of course, as badly as New York. New York is pretty much the bottom. You can't get worse than that. But with that, this one from Axios Cleveland, 2023 could be Ohio's year for legalized cannabis. And while we've heard this a lot, again, focus on the word could, so don't get your hopes up, but just figured I would share the highlights with you. Why it matters: legalization of rec cannabis could net the state up to $374 million in annual tax revenue, according to an April 2022 study. And so this is assuming the bill would also put a 10% tax on adult use products, And so again, they're hoping for what, a $3.75 billion market in its first year. I mean, that's very wishful thinking, but obviously we know the reasons why Ohio would benefit from legalizing for adult use. They already have a successful medical program, and cannabis reform, ending cannabis prohibition, obviously speaks for itself. And so the rest of that down here, if you wanted to pause to read, essentially everything that wasn't featured already at the top. And then with that, sharing what we already know, but Cannabis.net just highlighting that conservative cannabis, 68% of Republican voters even now support federal cannabis reform, says new CPEAR survey. And this doesn't even say just medical, it seems to be just federal cannabis for adult use, or at least for states' rights and for allowing states to make their own laws. And so shifting conservative support for cannabis reform may be a sign of changing tides in America. We'd like to think so, but again, sadly, a lot of the conservatives or Republicans are proving that if they're still anti-cannabis, they're not necessarily pro-choice and pro-freedom, which is, again, just says more about them than us. But pause to read a little bit more down here. Summary of the poll, impact of political alignment, and then reasons for cannabis illegality and expected shifts. Pause to read. Why politicians fail the will of the people. That's an obvious one when 91% agree on this at this point. And then sticky bottom line. So you can pause to read. Of course, if you want to grab the full link in the description, you can grab that. With that marijuana moment, 7 in 10 Louisiana residents support cannabis legalization, new poll finds. So great step in the right direction for Louisiana, who I do believe has medical cannabis at this point. 10 years ago, only 42% of Louisiana residents said they supported the reform, and so good to see that number up to roughly 70%, but figured I would just share. I just thought this was funny. Wish this mattered. I mean, it does matter. Again, small step in the right direction, but it necessarily really doesn't matter unless the people of Louisiana make noise and the lawmakers have some sort of a reason to want to be pro-cannabis, maybe, an election coming up. But with that, North Dakota is watching Minnesota's rec cannabis program, which is kind of funny when you understand that Minnesota's adult use program isn't going to launch until mid-2025, so really nothing to worry about until then. But worth noting that North Dakota's Division of Medical Cannabis Director Jason Wall says that when Montana went rec, it did have a negative impact on the two on the two medical dispensaries on the western side of North Dakota, Williston and Dickinson. And so will Minnesota have the same impact? Probably not till 2025, but only time will tell how much of an impact it might have on Grand Forks and Fargo. So again, if there's no legal outlets though in Minnesota, probably not going to matter till then. Around 9,500 North Dakotans qualify for the state's medical cannabis program. Damn, they should really expand that so more can get access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. But with that, another joke out of New York as they come. Marijuana moment. New York Senate passes bill to let legal cannabis businesses in New York City take local tax deductions prohibited under federal law. Wouldn't this be great if there were, legal dispensaries operating? And there's only 8, I believe, at this point. And so, if it wasn't for the 1,500 illicit ones stealing all the revenue and not having to pay tax, this wouldn't be as ironic and laughable. But I digress, as the reform would extend a state-level policy to New York City, which maintains separate tax laws. And so for what it's worth, at least the MSOs that are selling medical in the state of New York legally should be able to also deduct this tax. So that's at least a win, but it's, again, still it's laughable when there's only 8 legal dispensaries for adult use and 1,500 illicit ones. And so for more on that, of course, full link in the description if you want to go through it. But apparently the Senate has passed this legislation to fill the policy gap, voting 43 to 18 on Monday to send the local reform fix to the Assembly for consideration. And so again, helpful for anyone that has been able to operate in New York, this difficult market. And so a little bit more here if you just wanted to pause to read. Otherwise, of course, grab the full link in the description. But with that, thank you, Brad Racino, for our weekly thread. Here's how things are going in New York cannabis as of June 5th, 2023. So just going to read the highlights and invite you to pause to read. At this point, there should have been at least 120 CAURD stores open across New York City. According to Gov. Kathy Hochul in an October interview, there are 12. However, 3 are operating as delivery-only services, and 1 is temporarily offline. So 8 brick-and-mortar stores total. Of those, 4 are justice-involved, not nonprofits. But this excludes medical cannabis dispensaries. I don't know how many there are, but there were existing ones that MSOs were able to operate to sell medical to those in New York. And so, as of its last meeting, the Cannabis Control Board has awarded in total 215 CAURD licenses. And since they couldn't get those online, they created a bunch of new licenses and handed all of those out that they still haven't been able to get online. Oh, you can't make this shit up. Over the past month, dozens of CAURD licenses have come out publicly with stated grievances calling on DASNY and OCM to address their concerns. There is an OCM DASNY meeting with CAURD licenses happening this week, so we'll see what happens. So I don't want to spend too much time on this and read through them all, but so number 5, of course, you can pause to read. Number 6, you can pause to read. Number 7, you can pause to read, and then I'll put the link to this thread in the description, and of course, if you want to read any stories, just grab that and pull it up. Number 8, pause to read. Number 9, you can pause to read. Number 10. Let's hope no other state does it as badly as New York. Number 10, pause to read. Number 11, pause to read. Never ends. Number 12, pause to read. 13 as well at the bottom there, pause to read. And so that's essentially it for that. So with that, onto some studies, though. This one from Mary Ann Liebert, Inc. Cannabinoids in Treating Parkinson's Disease Symptoms, a systematic review of clinical studies. This one as of May 30th, 2023. And so it got together a bunch of studies after conducting searches in 4 different databases. 673 articles were screened. 13 articles were deemed eligible for inclusion in this review. It was shown that cannabis, CBD, and nabalene, a synthetic form of THC, were capable of consistently improving motor symptoms more than a placebo. Awesome. Time to deschedule. All treatments improved various non-motor symptoms, particularly with cannabis improving pain intensity and CBD improving psychiatric symptoms in a dose-dependent manner. Adverse effects were usually minor and, in the case of CBD, rare, except at very high doses. And they conclude cannabinoids have been shown to safely offer important potential in treating motor symptoms in PD and some non-motor symptoms, but then they want us to take them seriously when they continue to say this, as opposed to pointing out how laughable it is that cannabis is stuck in the CSA and the Schedule 1 where it doesn't belong in the first place. And if we can fix that, discrepancy, it'll make America look a lot more serious on the world stage. People can begin to take it seriously and respect it a little bit more again. But until then, another one, drug and alcohol dependence from Science Direct. Canada's cannabis legalization and police-reported cannabis-related criminal incidents among youth from 2015 to 2021. So you can pause to read the background and methods, but main thing to highlight the results. Legalization was associated with significant reductions in both male and female police-reported cannabis-related offenses. Boom. Love to see it. And there was no evidence, I repeat, no evidence of associations between cannabis legalization and patterns of property or violent crimes. And so conclusions results suggest that the impact of the Cannabis Act on reducing cannabis-related youth crimes is sustained, supporting the Act's objectives to reduce cannabis-related criminalization among youth and associated effects on the Canadian criminal justice. There's a bit more down here worth checking out if you wanted to pause to read. But with that, this one from Science Direct, the main study I wanted to show you because as of June 1st, this one was published, but I wanted to use one of their own words and claim that this is a pseudo-study. And while I will admit I didn't go through the whole study, and so obviously if you can prove otherwise with some of the data and want to articulate it in the comments and want to sway me, let me know. I could be swayed. I know I'll be very skeptical at first, but if you can do it well enough, I will change my mind, presented the new data. And all that to say is I read through some of the study. I didn't go through the whole thing, and I'm not trying to claim that I understand what any of this data means either, okay? Like, obviously, but when you just read some of what it says, it's almost as if the researchers are really trying to do some really difficult mental gymnastics. And so, who knows, but I'll let you be the judge. All I know is that I'm getting better and better at, sensing bullshit, that I think I'm getting allergic to it, and all I could do going through the studies, it's hard to stop. Anyways, adolescent exposure to low-dose THC disrupts energy balance, interesting, and adipose organ homeostasis in adulthood. So what this claims is that adipose is especially a body tissue used for the storage of fat. So think of it as adolescent exposure to low-dose THC disrupts your ability to store fat in adulthood. That seems to be what it's claiming. So I just find this funny because while I consume cannabis, I like to think that the reason that I'm not fat is it's because I have a morning ab workout I do every morning. I do 50 burpees every morning, and I go to jiu-jitsu 6 times a week. Now, I know not everyone is like me, but to claim that it's, the cannabis use that I had as an adolescent, that might be why I'm so lean, as opposed to the fact that I take care of my health, I eat well, I don't eat sugar, or I try not to eat as much sugar or any bad junk food, and, again, I prioritize my health. I just think that's an absolute farce. And so again, let's dig through this and see. Now again, not everyone's going to exercise, and I do know people that have consumed cannabis and gotten skinnier, but at the same time, it just seems like a bit of a stretch. One of the cannabis's most iconic effects is the stimulation of hedonistic high-calorie eating. Again, says who? Says the scientists, as opposed to, productive cannabis users. Yet habitual cannabis users are on average leaner than non-users. And so it seems like they're trying to figure out a justification as to why. We asked whether this phenotype might result from lasting changes in energy balance established during adolescence when use of the drug often begins. And it's also safer to say that if you're not consuming cannabis and you're not exercising, hence you're going to be fatter because you're not burning the calories that you're putting into your body. We found that daily low-dose administration of cannabis intoxicating constituent, THC, to adolescent male mice caused an adult metabolic phenotype characterized by reduced fat mass, increased lean mass, and utilization of fat as fuel. Isn't that how it's supposed to work? Partial resistance to diet-induced obesity, as opposed to you using your muscles as fuel. Partial resistance to diet-induced obesity and dyslipidemia enhance thermogenesis, and impaired cold and lipolysis. All that to say is, like, further analysis revealed that this phenotype is associated with molecular anomalies in the adipose organ, so again, your fat-storing organs, including ectopic overexpression of muscle-associated proteins and heightened anabolic processing. And so this final sentence, thus, adolescent exposure to THC may promote an enduring pseudo-lean. So they look lean, but they're not really lean. Hence, they call anything that's not in their narrative or their view of science pseudoscience. State that superficially resembles healthy leanness, but might in fact be rooted in adipose organ dysfunction. So they're trying to claim that the reason I'm so lean is not because of my exercise, but it's possibly because of my THC use. You cannot make this shit up. And so what's funny is I was like, don't tell me this study does not even mention the endocannabinoid system. But fortunately, they did not omit this very important system found in most, if not all, mammalian organs and is involved in a diversity of physiological processes, most importantly, helping put the body back into homeostasis or balance. And what's fascinating is when you learn that doctors in med school spend at most maybe 2 hours learning about this. And that explains why we've gotten to where we've gotten with the opioid epidemic, doctors being incentivized to sell prescription medication only, and not knowing anything about this very important system that helps regulate a lot of our bodily functions. And so you can pause to read. Of course, I'm telling you, I didn't go through the whole study, but I'm just pointing out what just made it seem like a farce, just outright. Cross-sectional and longitudinal studies have consistently reported lower body mass index in healthy cannabis users compared with non-users. Is it possible these healthy cannabis users also exercise, and these non-users don't exercise and drink a lot of beer and eat a lot of shit food? That makes more sense. As well as inverse associations of cannabis use with BMI, waist circumference, and other cardiometabolic risk factors. And look how many studies are referenced. From 14 to 29, right? So I don't know, but I find this absolutely laughable. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. And sure, it's possible that these intellectuals have stumbled upon something no one's discovered before, and now they can coin their new term, pseudo-lean disorder, for any cannabis user that happens to be attractive because they take care of themselves. It's preposterous. And get this, the metabolic phenotype of habitual cannabis users is all the more paradoxical because one of the drug's most iconic effects is the stimulation of, again, they love this hedonic, high-calorie food intake, the munchies, when I'm pretty sure new studies have come out that have debunked this. So this is, again, a stereotype that's false. It's not true, but these researchers want to hang on dear life to these old stereotypes, which does not undergo noticeable tolerance with continued non-medical use of the drug. And all that to say is if these are really the effects, it would probably be in fat people's best interests to meet cannabis sooner than later. Fuck Ozempic. Lose weight the natural way. Well, I got this one from PubMed, and while it is an older one, just wanted to use it to highlight how important the endocannabinoid system is, and when it's not working properly, how it can lead to certain illnesses or diseases that people get. As clinical endocannabinoid deficiency revisited, can this concept explain the therapeutic benefits of cannabis in migraine, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, and other treatment-resistant conditions? And so this is an older one written by Ethan B. Russo, Canadian doctor, one of the early cannabis researchers in Canada and sort of in the 21st century. So much appreciate the work you've done, Ethan Russo. Written in 2003, explored the concept of a clinical endocannabinoid deficiency underlying the pathophysiology of migraine, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, and other functional conditions alleviated by medical cannabis. And so the conclusion, subsequent research has confirmed that underlying endocannabinoid deficiencies indeed play a role in all of this, hence why cannabis helps bring the body into balance if it's missing said endocannabinoids. Clinical experience is bearing this out, but of course further research, and especially clinical trials, will further demonstrate the usefulness of medical cannabis 100%, but we need to deschedule it so that we can facilitate this at the mass scale needed to find the results needed based on sample sizes. As legal barriers fall and scientific bias fades, this will become more apparent. And I think this little summary was published in 2014, so we've come a long way. We keep fighting, but with that, from Tom Angle, shared this as of June 6th, yesterday. A new congressional bill from Rep. Dina Titus and Joe Neguse would authorize $150 million to support cannabis research at universities while allowing them to obtain cannabis for studies from state regulatory agencies. Sounds good, but wouldn't that be a massive waste of $150 million when you can just go through PubMed, type in cannabis, and find 31,988 results? And so while they might have their best intentions at heart, and no doubt it might help get votes if their voter base is dumb enough not to realize that printing more of their taxpayer dollars is not a good thing, I think I speak for everyone when I say, stop wasting taxpayer time and money. There's enough studies. We just need the plant descheduled, for fuck's sakes already. So where's the HHS? Where's the DOJ? I think this dude speaks for all of us. And we do know from now until the end of the month is the time frame to get safe out for a vote. Sherrod Brown said he wants it, but I think it's up to Schmuck ultimately, from now until then, we'll find out Schmuck continues to be the prohibitionist that he lies about not being. But full link in the description if you want to go through that. Another one from Marijuana Moment, as a new coalition of major cannabis groups launches push for scheduling reform, even if it falls short of legalization. And while obviously descheduling is the best case scenario because it's a farce that cannabis is still in the CSA in the first place, governments don't want to give up that control, especially the U.S. government, because then they're going to have to admit that the failed war on drugs was a war on people. But in the near term, as federal agencies take their sweet-ass time to complete a cannabis scheduling review at the president's direction, you'd almost think it's on purpose, because all they need to do is take the old co-memo, replace Cole with Garland, hit print, and it would help the industry so much. We've got a new coalition of major cannabis companies and advocacy organizations, more paychecks, that is launched, aiming to advance the conversation in a way that embraces the potential benefits of an incremental rescheduling move, even as they push for broader legalization. And so again, while it's a farce that it's in the CSA, these groups are saying we'll take a rescheduling to 3, 4, or 5 in the near term and continue to fight for full descheduling down the road, as opposed to getting nothing at all, which is fair and reasonable, especially when Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 are the only two schedules where the 280E tax code applies. And so if they could reschedule cannabis, then it would save the MSOs and any single state operator, anyone in the industry, essentially, they would get their profits back, and it wouldn't be going to the federal government. And so this would be historic progress in the near term that shouldn't be discounted, no doubt. Do you think this can happen? I mean, obviously this is more likely than descheduling outright, but let me know what you think in the comments. I invite you to grab the full link in the description if you want to go through it, but we'll update you if this new coalition and these groups make any progress. We hear a lot about these groups, but sadly no progress yet. But with that, last few stories from Weedstocks. Someone's prediction on TerrAscend and their TSX uplisting will happen within days of shareholder approval, based on a quote given by Executive Chairman Jason Wild. And so take this with a grain of salt, as it is a random poster, Money Monster 420 on Reddit, but he's at least putting his money where his mouth is. And so the shareholder vote is set to take place on Thursday, June 22nd, which is a couple weeks away. So you can pause to read here, but then he says history, how past cannabis stocks performed when they were uplisted. And that is worth paying attention to. One, Canopy Growth weed price action, Kronos price action, and what this means for other MSOs, safe banking, and the HHS Schedule 3. It's worth remembering that June is a very big month, and there are a lot of potential catalysts around the corner. However, if we don't get what we're promised by the end of June, most importantly, the vote on the Safe Banking Act from either Sherrod Brown or Schmuck, time to put your money where your mouth is, then it's going to make us a lot more skeptical that we're going to get anything else. And so big next few weeks coming up. Keep that in mind. But with that, last few stories outside the US before we sign off. Thank you, Matt Lemers, who writes for MJ Biz Daily on this recent story, as Canada's unsold cannabis inventory balloons to 1.5 billion grams. What a shame. If it's still smokable, they might as well put it in envelopes and sell it to all their registered medical users or anyone that has purchased cannabis online through the government. Might as well use it. But equivalent to approximately 750 Ford F-150 pickup trucks, as Canada's mountain of unsold and mostly unsellable cannabis gets bigger and bigger every year. It's very unfortunate, but don't be like Canada. With a population of 40 million, there was 3 companies. I think Aurora wanted to grow 600,000 square feet of cannabis. Canopy wanted to grow 500,000 square feet, and then Afria at the time wanted to grow 250,000 square feet. We didn't need that much. So of course you can grab the full link in the description, but he does provide some easy to read summaries, and so you can pause to read from macroeconomic conditions to which accounts to 3/4 of the market. And then supply and demand for edible cannabis in Canada, some numbers. Supply and demand for cannabis extracts in Canada, more numbers. And then supply and demand for cannabis topicals in Canada, a bit more down here. But of course, if you design the industry to benefit the government more than the industry, this is what you get. Sadly, it sucks that governments and politicians are using the cannabis industry as a socialist experiment. Well, I got this one from Matt Lemers as well, but I wanted to share this to highlight the bigger problem that we have with policymakers letting ideology get in the way of the will of the people and common sense, and how that will have serious consequences down the line. You don't know this woman, but you're really going to dislike her in a bit after I show you this video from her. But so from my understanding, Canada's mental health minister, I don't even think she's our health minister. Our health minister is probably now a mental health minister, and there's no health minister, but appears to have told Germany's health minister that 70% of the illicit market for cannabis in Canada is gone. And from my understanding, that's false. I think we'd hit 50 or 60, but weekly, monthly, these numbers are going to fluctuate. It's not like we're going to ever know that in stone. And so for her to say that to him just flat out is misleading. But no doubt, ending cannabis prohibition has been great, and the legal market has eaten a big share of the black market, and there's been a lot of tax dollars collected, and I don't necessarily trust my government with reallocating that, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. All that to say is Matt Lemers points out it's not true. We'll explain using Health Canada's own data, important to stick to reality lest we give German politicians and voters unmeetable expectations. Obviously, this lady seems like that's all what she's all about. And so there's more down here, of course, if you wanted to pause to read, but I doubt you're going to go through the whole thing, of course. Grab the link if you're interested. But all that to highlight is, again, the main problem is with socialist, communist, fascist ideology seeping into these policymakers. Because get this, the Canada that I live in now is not the Canada I grew up in, and I don't know if you know this, but in Canada, we now have a government-assisted suicide program that increased like 1,000-fold% over the last year, and I think most Canadians want nothing to do with this. We should try and treat people with depression, try and fix the root cause and get them better, as opposed to allowing them to kill themselves as an out. I think anyone in the right mind would think that, right? If you think life is something to value. But a lot of these politicians seem to have succumbed to this pro-death cult ideology. And so that is how you actually get this out of this woman. So just get this. For context, this is the Conservative leader asking a question and having her respond in an insane way. And she says the quiet part out loud.
Of growing poverty and desperation. More and more Canadians are suffering with depression. Some of them are going to food banks asking for help ending their lives, not because they're sick, but because life has become so miserable and they want to end their lives altogether.
Under the Trudeau
This
government.
government has suggested veterans should end their lives instead of getting help that they need.
It's
and now
embarrassing.
they've announced that a year from today, they will introduce measures to end the lives of people who are depressed. Will they recognize that we need to treat depression and give people hope for a better life rather than ending their life?
And imagine this.
Mr. Speaker, I think it is totally irresponsible for the Leader of the Opposition to misrepresent what this means. All of the assessors and providers for MAID are purposely trained to eliminate people that are suicidal. And so this is for...
No one bats an eye on her side. What? What? This woman's insane. This woman is insane, and she's the mental health minister of Canada. So pray for us, folks. U.S., we might need your help in the next few years, but
10 seconds left.
I have faith we'll be able to bounce back.
On this side, and with the support of the expert panel and so many Canadians, we'll continue to develop and provide the kind of mental health supports that are necessary for people who are depressed. But the people...
Yeah, ideas have people. People don't have ideas, and that is one evil woman there. And so last bit to highlight, Marijuana Moment shares Colombian senators approve cannabis legalization bill, setting stage for final vote. And so let's hope that Colombia can pull through with this. While we've seen this effort out of Mexico, even after the Supreme Court in Mexico ruled cannabis being illegal as unconstitutional, they couldn't get it done. The cartel had too much power. So let's hope Colombia can. This marks the 7th of 8 votes before the proposed constitutional amendment is sent to the president. And so we're pretty close, but I want to share this story once it actually happens, as opposed to going through what could be until it actually happens. And so full link in the description if you want to read through it, but I will update you once Colombia hopefully becomes the second country in South America to end cannabis prohibition. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.